3rd of May 2007, the 3-year-old disappeared whilst on holiday in Portugal with her family.
For more, let's speak to former Scotland Yard detective Peter Bleksley on this. Are you surprised by this, Peter?
Quite frankly, I'm not, although this is not the end of all the inquiries into Madeleine's disappearance, because if we can just remind ourselves of the chronology of it. So 2007, Madeleine disappears. The Portuguese, of course, launched their investigation, which is manifestly unsuccessful. 2011, the Met launch an investigative review. 2 years later, in 2013, they say, right, this is now a fully fledged investigation. What has also happened, of course, in recent years is that the German authorities have become very much embroiled in this story, because in 2020 they said, we think we've got the man for this. But of course, what they didn't have was the evidence to substantiate
Where
that
do you think
claim.
that evidence is?
Well, the man that's currently in jail in Germany is convicted of previous crimes, including drug dealing and the rape of a 72-year-old woman. Now, that's okay, that would seem to indicate that he's a very unsavoury character. But there is circumstantial evidence that the Germans have released. For example, he was living in Praia de Luz at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. He clearly has a predilection for some kind of sexual activity which is illegal. And there are other bits and pieces. He had a vehicle, apparently, which may be similar, but that's all circumstantial evidence. And for me, what this perfectly illustrates is that sometimes it is one thing to know something, but it's an entirely different thing to be able to prove it.
Yeah, so the horrible thought is that he could be released from jail without charge. Who knows what will happen in the case? But just in relation to Madeleine McCann, it feels like yesterday, doesn't it? It's amazing how many details we can all remember of that particular abduction. And yet, £12.5 million taxpayers' money has been spent on that investigation. And it is just one case. There have been so many other deaths and tragedies along the way that haven't had the same amount of spotlight. Do you think it has been disproportionate, the amount of investment?
Well, I'm often puzzled by which cases grip the media's attention and in turn the public's interest, and which cases don't. It's a sad fact of life that many, many people who suffer tragedy by losing a loved one to murder, for example, simply don't get the airtime and the column inches that other cases do. This particular disappearance of Madeleine, I think, struck a chord with many people in the media and the public, because it was the epitome of a sort of middle-class bit of winter sun holiday. Her parents are both doctors, and so I think it struck a note. And of course, it is tragic because this clearly lovely young girl was so cruelly disappeared and as yet never to be seen again.
And what is also tragic is the way the Portuguese authorities handled the whole thing.
Without a doubt. In the 21st century, the things that solve a major crime, generally speaking, like this, are forensics, okay? DNA, fibres, maybe an old-school fingerprint, all that kind of stuff. And unfortunately, that scene was trampled all over by Uncle Tom Cobley and all, because in the very first instance, the crime wasn't dealt with as seriously as it should have been. We saw so much footage of officers with their big clunky boots going in and out of that apartment. People that should have had no right to be there being granted access to that apartment. And we can sadly only kind of guess at how much potential evidence was destroyed or otherwise removed on the bottom of somebody's boot.
Yeah, the mystery just will always be there, I think. But, I mean, is this the last we're going to hear?
No, most definitely not. Most definitely not. Mr. Wolters, who was the, I think, somewhat unwise German prosecutor to be so bullish and bold about this case without having the evidence to back up what he was saying, they clearly have an ongoing investigation. I don't suppose the Portuguese will ever completely be allowed to kind of, put this away. So whilst the Met, it is reported, will be winding up their investigation in the autumn, this story is going to continue to run and run.